legends of professional wrestling, Eric Bischoff, Scott Hall, and Kevin Nash. Give it up for them, everybody.
I love that hat. We were going to ask you guys to hum our ring music because they couldn't get it here. All right.
You could have told me that in the back. We're going to figure out something.
Sure, bro. Go ahead.
Again, thank you guys for being here. Hope Buffalo's treated you well so far. Honor and a privilege on behalf of everybody in this room to have you guys here.
Glad to be here.
I also feel like it's a great time for you guys to be here because there's a lot of anniversaries that three of you are celebrating this year. Scott, for example, last month we just celebrated the 25th anniversary of your classic ladder match with Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 10. At that time...
Yay! Thanks, Kev.
Kevin's watching it on YouTube right now.
And I just got sent to the back.
Go to Gorilla?
Oh yeah.
Scott, at that time, did you guys have any sense that that was going to be an all-time classic? Like, when did that start to set in?
We had several matches. You know, we just showed up in a town in California one time and just sat on the sheet ladder match.
San Bernardino.
Yeah, and we were late. And you don't show up late to Jack Lance's towns. But so we had a few in a row. So we started figuring out what worked, what didn't work, and when we got to Mania, we tried to do, the best we could. The thing that I remember the most about the match was it went really well. I was really happy, and Randy Savage was wrestling Crush after us. But to me, with that kind of ladder match, once you set it in motion, you can't speed it up or slow it down. You're doing all Hollywood, And I remember coming to the back, and Mach went, "First of all, I want to say great match. Second of all, I want to say you're very, very selfish." And I remember going, "Thanks, and you're right."
Kevin, another anniversary we got coming up later this year. It'll be 25 years since you won the WWF World Heavyweight title. What are some of your fondest
Eight seconds in Madison Square Garden.
What are some of your fondest memories of that title run?
Giving the belt back to Brett. I came out of the shoe working with Backlund and went right into Bundy. I was like, phew.
Something I think a lot of people may not realize about that title run, though, 358 days, just short of a year. Following that, then, every title holder did not hold the belt longer than you until 2007 when John Cena broke it. So 13 years, nobody held that title longer than you did. Why do you think you were the last person to hold that title for so long, and what do you think maybe changed the booking perspective of having champions have lengthy title reigns like that?
I think one of the things was that the competition from Nitro, that it was almost impossible to keep the interest of people if you had long reigning champions. I think that was one of the things. Now there's guys that have been in the business, 7 years and they're 23-time champions.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in too that back in the era when I was the IC champ and Kev was the main belt holder, there was only 4 pay-per-views a year. Now there's like 12 more a year, so that causes more title changes and stuff. Because back then they would only drop the belt at a big show, so that factors in too. It was a different era.
Yeah, usually I think that was the difference. Was I was the first one in like 12 years that went into WrestleMania with the belt and left with it. That was usually the turning point when the guy lost the championship.
Right.
See how I've been awfully conditioned to call it the championship? by Vince.
Oh wow, yeah, that's right. They lectured me and Sean before we did our interview, and we still said strap and bell.
Yeah.
Kevin, you also, with that title win, you became just the third Triple Crown champion at that time, and for the company. Did you have a sense of that at the time, or was that not something that was really being promoted or advertised until later on?
I smell a rat. Remember that going into going into our pay-per-view?
No, it was.
Remember you guys won the tag straps
In
the day before Chicago,
Right.
with Walter Payton and me.
Yeah, we won them in Indianapolis, right, in the house show.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was. We weren't real popular. Our group of guys, you know, so it was like before one of us coughed up a belt to somebody else, we beat somebody else and got another belt. So.
What Kev's getting to is we're telling inside stories here to let you in on it. Kev and Sean beat the Samoans in a house show the day before the SummerSlam pay-per-view in Chicago at the United Center. So at that time, Kev was tag champion and Intercontinental champion. And I had Walter Payton in my corner in Chicago, and then, then I beat Kev. But Kev was never without a belt, and that some of the boys in the locker room really were like marked out about it. And of course, which only makes us stir it up more.
Eric, I'm going to go completely on a different tangent here, but North Korea is in the news a lot lately. And in 1995, you did something pretty amazing as part of WCW. You, along with New Japan Professional Wrestling, hosted a 2-day event in North Korea at the Mayday Stadium. Over 150,000 people at each show. Ran with New Japan Wrestling as part of Antonio Inoki. Looking back on that, what are some of your thoughts, and how do you look back on an event like that, which today sounds crazy? Like, it sounds like that could never happen.
It was just as crazy then, actually. And, when I look back at it, it was such an adventure for me. I've always loved traveling. I've always loved the idea of learning new cultures and being exposed to things that you're just not exposed to here in the United States. And growing up, I grew up, I was born in 1955. So throughout the 60s, when the Cold War was at its peak, and I remember Kevin and I probably we grew up in almost the same neighborhood, in the same part of town. And I think you probably remember this as well. We used to have air raid drills, because people were still afraid back then that there was going to be a nuclear war. And about once every couple months, we'd all have to get under our desks and go through these different drills in preparation for a nuclear attack. I mean, that's how serious, the Cold War was at that time. So for me to have the opportunity as an adult to go and experience a communist country, one of the most isolated communist countries in the world, I just had to do it. And it wasn't smart. I probably shouldn't have done it. There was no real financial upside for me or the company at the time, but I just felt that it was important to establish that WCW was more of a worldwide brand and not just a domestic US property. And I thought, what better way than to go over to Pyongyang, North Korea? And I really thought we would get a lot of news coverage, especially since we were owned by Turner Broadcasting / CNN. I thought for sure we'd get some coverage when we went over there, and that was really the reason why I did it, other than my personal interest. And ironically, there was a guy there by the name of Mike Shinoy, who was based in South Korea, but he covered North Korea for the AP, Associated Press. And he was there and didn't cover us at all. We got no coverage on CNN, which is really, it just pissed me, it still gets me hot. If we talk about it for more than another minute or two, I'll start throwing shit.
I should have brought one, I forgot.
That sounds bad for me then, because I have one more.
No, go ahead. I just don't want to talk about the press we didn't get.
Well, you also had Muhammad Ali with you guys at the time too, right?
Right.
I'm really surprised that there was no coverage of that.
Yeah, we just got blacklisted. Nobody wanted to cover it. And actually, the experience going over there with Muhammad was probably, there's a couple highlights for me. One was, how many people here listen to my podcast? Okay, quite a few of you. So I won't retell the story, but for those of you that don't listen,
Listen.
Yeah, it's up. You can go listen to it. But running through, I snuck out of my hotel one night, one morning about 6:30 in the morning. Back then I was running about 5 or 6 miles a day, but I always like to run in the mornings. So we had a handler, an attaché, which was really part of the North Korean secret police, that were supposed to keep track of us and keep an eye on us and not let us get out in the public, you know. Anywhere they didn't take us, they didn't want us to be. Well, I snuck out of the hotel at the crack of dawn. It was still dark out, and I just went running. And by the time I was about halfway through my run, the sun started coming up and the streets started filling with North Koreans walking to work. And to look in the eyes of these North Koreans who had grown up thinking that Westerners, Americans in particular, were devils and that we would rape their women and eat their children. I'm not exaggerating, that's what they were taught. Now picture me, and I'm only 5'10", at the time I weighed about 185, 190 pounds. Compared to the North Koreans, I was like Kevin standing next to me, right? I felt like Kevin. These people were so small, and they were all malnourished. That's why they were so small. They were pale, and just gray looking, and they looked like the Walking Dead characters. But the fear in their eyes, and you know, we all think we know what fear looks like when you look into somebody's eyes and you can tell they're scared, whether it's a young child or something. I've never seen fear like that in anybody's eyes in my entire life. And that was one standout moment. The other one was getting to know Muhammad Ali. And I actually flew on a plane from Tokyo to North Korea sitting next to Muhammad. And he couldn't articulate very well unless he whispered. If he whispered, you had to listen really carefully, but you could really understand what he was saying. If he tried to speak loudly, you know, a normal voice, he couldn't get it out. But he was whispering in my ear on this North Korean military transport how as a young boy growing up in Louisville, he would go to the wrestling matches and his favorite character was Gorgeous George. And he told me in his own words how when he became known and as Cassius Clay in boxing, that persona that we all came to know, you know, when we were kids growing up, that loud, I'm so pretty, all the crazy smack talk that he did, that was all from Gorgeous George. That was his impression of who Gorgeous George was as a young boy. And to be able to hear that in his own voice is an experience I'll never forget.
So, the process of getting that event put together, what were some of the legal hurdles you had over here in America, or what kind of?
I had none because I didn't ask for permission. I learned, one of the first things I learned in the wrestling business when I broke in 1987 is don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. So I kept it quiet. And all Turner knew was that I was going to Tokyo. Turner Broadcasting didn't know that I was also going to North Korea after I went to Tokyo.
Hence, no press coverage.
Damn!
Did you get flack for that then, when you came back?
No, I thought I might. You know, in fact, I had some people that I knew in CNN, some executives, and before I left, I think, okay, well, if I'm gonna end up in jail, I want to be prepared for that. I want to have an attorney lined up to help get me out. I want to figure out how much time I'm facing, and just in case it gets ugly. So I did a little bit of research, and they said, look, the State Department may hold you and want to debrief you and spend a couple days talking to you about what you experienced over there. And they may threaten you with a fine, they may make you spend a night or two in jail, but it's not going to be that serious. So once I heard that, I was like, oh, hell with it. I don't even need to spend the money on the attorney if that's all it's going to be.
Now, Kevin, Scott, with all due respect to you two, I don't think you can top Eric's excursion, but what would you two say is the craziest or most memorable international trip that you ever went on?
I don't know. I mean, we had a pretty fun car trip from Detroit to Toronto, WrestleMania 18. I mean, it doesn't have to be a long distance. We're not afraid of, you know, I learned from Kurt Hennig a long time ago when I first, you know, broke in and started getting national push, is that, you know, you're on the road, so you might as well have fun. And Ric Flair taught me that too. Like, hey, you might as well have fun because your life is going by. Like, I remember I used to drive packed with a bunch of guys in a Ford Taurus and stay at 3 Triple Heel and Motel 6 and stuff. And Flair pointed out to me, like, you know, Marriott don't cost that much better, and the beds are better, and they got room service. And, you know, go ahead and spend a little more and get a Cadillac, because God forbid you get in a wreck. You're way safer in a Cadillac. So once you look at it that way, like, and Hennig was always about having fun on the road, you know. He would go, woo, here we are, we're going to Des Moines, you know, like, you know, wherever we were was the place to be. So once you get around guys who have that kind of attitude, it just kind of rubs off on you.
Kevin, you got anything that comes to mind?
Well, I think that Scott forgot the reason that we drove from Was it here, right?
No, wasn't it Cleveland?
Oh, yeah.
Because you were in the hair salon forever getting your hair off. That's when he was rocking the long blonde hair, and he was.
Remember the girl from WWE? She screwed my hair up.
Yeah, that's what happened. You weren't in the salon drinking red wine
No, but
for
the
5
thing,
hours.
no, but the thing was though, the funny thing is they WWE couldn't get Scott and I into Canada on a plane. So we had to like basically sneak in across the bridge.
They loaded us with merch, tickets to WrestleMania, everything.
Well, we had a box with 4 seats for the guy at customs, and Scott and I, we were kind of intoxicated as we made our trip.
I was not driving, I'll go on record.
And we realized at one point during the trip that we had some items that we probably shouldn't have on us. So instead of throwing them out the window,
That'd be
we
littering. That'd be littering.
decided to throw them down our throat,
Oh.
which made for a
Yeah, they kicked in right about the time we got to the
right
border.
about the time we got in front of the customs guy, and I looked over at Scott, and we're both.
Do I look effed up? Yes.
And thank God, man, it was like 4 in the morning, and the guy that came up was like, he looked like he was 17 years old. It was his first shift, and we went, "Would you like 4 seats to WrestleMania?" That's all he heard. We were in.
Stamps. Stamps.
I drove about 100 yards to a Tim Hortons, and we slept for 4 hours.
Hey.
Oh my.
Folks, if anybody has a question,
But there was no news coverage.
Gotcha.
No news coverage.
if anybody's got a question, please line up over this way. Go ahead and come up to the mic, ask away.
No.
He beat you, bro. Superstar Billy Graham tribute shirt on.
All right, is this thing working?
You're good.
Yep.
First of all, I'm very happy to meet you guys. You are some amazing talents.
Thanks for noticing.
All right, my question for Scott and Kevin was, you guys did several characters, like Scott, you did Razor Ramon, the Diamond Stud, and Kevin, you did Big Daddy Cool Diesel, Vinny Vegas. What were your favorite characters to play?
For me, well, the Razor thing was my first big national break, and I was ripping off Scarface, and I remember when I tried out for Vince, and I tell the same story all the time, he liked what I was doing, and he said, well, we got to put a name on you. I understand your father's in the Army, and I'm thinking, Vince, I'll be the best G.I. Joe I can be. I said, you ever see Scarface? He went, no, and I went, say hello to the bad guy. And he started laughing, and he liked it, and he personally directed the vignettes I did in South Beach and stuff, so it was, that was my first really big break, where I was kind of, I already knew the physical stuff, but I never knew the character thing. I was Scott Hall in the ring, I was Scott Hall in the grocery store. I didn't know the difference when you step through the curtain. But people don't want to see the guy in the grocery store. They want to see the guy on TV, that cool guy, that funny guy. So I pretend to be him. Of course, now I go back to my room and cry. I enjoyed the fake guy better.
Did you ever see yourself being such a great heel?
Well, you must not have hung around me much, bro.
I was a little young back then.
To me, it's always better to start off as a villain because anybody can be the hero. All you gotta do is win. But the villain runs the show. Nothing happens until the bad guy enters the scene. Any movie, any book, it doesn't get exciting until there's some conflict. So, and to me, it lengthens your career because you come in as a villain, then you get your villain run, then you turn babyface, then you get that babyface run. I don't think it works as well when you're a good guy and you turn bad. I don't think that works as well, in my opinion.
Well, Eric, you had heel down set. I mean, you were a dick on TV. No offense.
Yeah, I'll have you know he's a black belt, bro. So
I know, Eric.
watch it, Twiggy.
I saw what you did.
Oh, Scott, you're too funny.
My question for Eric was, what was it like going to work for Vince after WCW went folded?
It was great. I had been out of the wrestling business for a couple years by that point, and I'd kind of put it all behind me. I never thought there would be an opportunity to go to work for WWE, so mentally I just had to divorce myself from the business and reinvent myself and figure out what I was going to do. I was still fairly young. I had bills to pay, and kids were young and all that kind of stuff. So I looked at wrestling in my rearview mirror, and I was starting to miss it. And I think more than that, the way my career ended in WCW was not a highlight for me. It didn't end well. And it was actually Kevin, because Kevin was in WWE at the time. Kevin gave me a call and said, "Hey, don't be surprised if you get a call from Vince McMahon, just telling you." I went, "Wow, I can't believe that's going to happen, but thanks for the heads up." And 2 days later, Vince called. And I remember I was sitting in my office in Arizona, and within about 2 minutes, I knew I was going to go to work for him. I just knew it. He was very gracious, the term I use is elegant. He could have been nicer, more respectful, said a few really, really kind things. And I knew in the middle of listening to him speak that this would be an opportunity for me to end my career on a high note. Whether I was going to be there for a week, for a month, for a year, I never thought I'd be there for more than a year. I really didn't. Because I knew that as a talent, if all I had to worry about was performing, I had a lot of confidence in my ability to be a good character, and I had a lot of backstory. It would have been hard to screw it up, actually. I would have had to really try hard to mess that up because it was just perfect. For all the years and the Monday Night Wars and all the heat between the two companies, all I really had to do was show up and be a bit of a jackass, and I knew it would work. And I thought to myself, that's the way I want to end my career. I want to end it on a high note. And also as a performer, to have the opportunity to work with a whole cast of characters that I'd never had a chance to work for or work with. Whether it be, Kane or John Cena or whoever else it was. What a great opportunity. So I knew within 2 minutes of that conversation what the next year, at least year of my life was probably going to look like. And to have the opportunity to be there for whatever it was, 4 or 5 years, I never thought that would happen. And I'm grateful for every minute of it. I had an absolute blast while I was there.
And Eric, you're still having an impact on the business, though. You've been associating with Cody a little bit for All Elite Wrestling, offering input. How has that interaction been?
Well, nobody's called me from AEW. The only input I've given is in interviews or when people ask me, what I think. But happy as hell for them. I'm happy just being a fan at this point. I love doing my podcast. I love showing up at events like this. I like interacting with fans at this level. It's always fun for me. I don't like the travel that's associated with it, but once I'm here, I have way more fun than you guys are having, to be honest with you.
Hi guys, Eric, speaking of your podcast, glad to see that mountain lion did not get you. That's great to hear that.
Can we elaborate on that?
Yeah, it was 2 Sundays ago, or whatever it was. I let my dog, I live out in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. I mean, really in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. And there's all kinds of wildlife on my property, elk, deer, antelope, coyotes, you name it. I've lived there for 20 years. I've never seen a mountain lion. I know that they're in the area, but I've never seen one, right? And I got up one morning, Sunday morning, and I was getting ready to do my podcast. So I got up about 5:30 in the morning because I had to do some research and drink 3 or 4 gallons of coffee and all the things I need to do to be able to attempt to be entertaining on a podcast. And my dog needed to get outside, so I let her. She made a big racket. She saw something outside. She was just barking and yipping and tearing through the house. I thought maybe there's a rabbit or a coyote or something out there. So I was like, okay, Nikki, threw her out the door. And she just took off, made the weirdest sound I've ever heard out of her. And I thought, well, there's something other than a rabbit or coyote out there. And I looked out and I saw her go bailing over the backside of my property. And where I live, it's really mountainous and ravines and shit like that. And I saw her ass end go down over a ravine. I thought, man, she's moving out. I better catch up with her and see what she's after. So I throw on my shoes. Now I'm in my sweatpants that I use for pajamas and a t-shirt, and I go running outside after my dog, and I'm yelling for her. She usually comes back like in a minute. She's back. She's good recall. I'm yelling for her, blowing the whistle because she's whistle trained. She's not coming back. I'm thinking, okay, this is serious shit. Something's out there. So now I'm really running as hard as I can, up and down these ravines, jumping over sagebrush, all kinds of Olympic level shit. And all of a sudden I see my dog coming up over the hill again, and she's chasing a freaking mountain lion. Scared the hell out of me. Now I'm thinking to myself, what am I gonna do? It's a mountain lion. And the mountain lion stops. From here, that camera away now, and my dog's coming up after the mountain lion stops and it's looking at me broadside. I'm thinking, shit. I got no gun, I got nothing, and my heart is like up in my throat because I'm so out of shape, it's pathetic. And you know you're out of shape, but you don't know how out of shape till you start running through the sagebrush chasing a dog that's chasing a mountain lion. So the dog comes up, mountain lion takes back off again. I'm thinking, now I gotta really get to my dog. I don't care if I don't have a gun, I don't care if I get wrapped up in the process, but I love my dog a lot, like a lot. So now I'm banging, I'm still running, I'm thinking, hell, I'm gonna die. Not from the mountain lion. I'm just gonna die out here. Now I'm so far out in the back into my property that no one's gonna find me. I'm gonna be down in the freaking ravine. I'm gonna be gone for days, and somebody's gonna look up and say, what are all those crows and those vultures circling out there like in an old Western? These thoughts are going through my head. Now I can't see my dog anywhere. I'm looking down into a van. I can't see my dog anywhere. Now I'm panicking for my dog. So I turn around and run back to my house. Not run, stagger. I'm staggering back to my house, and I'm thinking, this is for real. I'm gonna have a freaking heart attack. I mean, I really for real thought I was. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to be funny. And because my wife was out of town, I'm thinking she's just not gonna be able to find me for a long time. So I finally get back to my house. I was gonna jump in my truck and go looking for her. And my dog comes wagging her tail. She comes running around the house. Hey, that was fun. That was more fun than just going for a hike, Dad. That was fun. It took me about 45 minutes before I could see because my heart was pounding so hard, I couldn't focus my eyes. That's how close I came to blowing myself up chasing a fucking mountain. Sorry. Yeah, that's a mountain lion story.
What kind of dog do you have that was chasing a mountain lion?
Australian cattle dog. And that's one of the reasons I got her is because I spent a lot of time up in the mountains hunting elk and stuff. And, you know, an Australian cattle dog, they'll go after a grizzly bear. I mean, they fear nothing, which is why my dog was chasing a mountain lion.
Once you're settled then, did you have to like report it to rangers, police or anything?
No,
Just
the
is
mountain
what it is.
lions live there, man.
Right.
They were there before we were.
True, yeah.
Well, my question was for all three of you about the favored nations in both Kevin and Scott's contract. In episode 3 of your podcast, you debunked it that they didn't have it until any type of language of it until '97. Kevin has gone on record twice in 2 different interviews that before they went to WCW, Scott showed him a contract that said, hey, I have the favored nations. I'm an IC champ. You're the world champ. You come in, I'll get bumped up more. Who's telling the truth? Who's not remembering anything correctly? Who's what?
You're kind of a dick.
Sorry. Everybody says, please, I want the truth.
I can't remember what I had for breakfast, bro. So, I'm not going to sit here and argue with Eric. He took care of me for years, and I appreciate it. And,
I'm going to jump in. Here's one of the things that I've learned. Hulk Hogan is one of my best friends, right? And not a secret. I was listening to an interview he did about a week ago. I read it. It was transcribed. He was on Booker T's podcast. And Booker T asked Hulk about how the nWo story got started. And I'm reading this transcript from one of my best friends, right, talking about how the nWo got started. And I'm thinking to myself, brother, that ain't even close. You weren't there. He was actually doing a movie called Santa with Muscles. And at the time...
No, it was Witch Mountain.
Was it Witch Mountain?
It was Witch Mountain 2. Robert Vaughn and Gordon Fairchild.
straight to DVD.
You got to keep in mind, Hulk, his first contract, or the contract at that time, only called for 4 pay-per-views a year. and then a couple TVs leading into each pay-per-view. So he was very much a part-time guy anyway. He had fulfilled almost all of his agreement. He only owed us one more pay-per-view. So he was off doing a movie when Scott Hall came down through the state or through the crowd and confronted me on May 27th, 1996. I didn't know that because it was my birthday. And then, you know, the week later, Kevin comes in. About a week after Kevin comes into the scene, we establish Kevin, I get a call from Hulk Hogan saying, "Hey, brother, what's going on? What are you guys doing?" He goes, "Can you come out and talk to me?" And you know, on the set, he couldn't leave the movie set, so I flew out to LA, and he wanted to know who the third guy was going to be because we'd already established that, you know, mystery at that point, and I didn't want to tell him because I wasn't sure he could keep it quiet, to be honest. I didn't want anybody to know at that point. And at that point, it was going to be Sting, by the way, because I didn't think Hulk would do it. So we kept, and this was like at midnight. We're sitting in this trailer in the middle of nowhere, California, on this movie set. There was about 30 cans of beer involved and a couple Cuban cigars. So he finally, he's trying to wear me down, trying to get it out of me. And he said, "Brother, you gotta tell me who's the third guy." I said, "Who do you think it should be?" He said, "You're looking at him, brother." I went, "Oh, okay." That's how it really started from his perspective. He didn't know anything about it. He didn't know Scott was coming in. He didn't know Kevin was coming in. Jimmy Hart was sending him, you know, videotapes so he could keep track of what was going on. So my point to all of that is we all remember things differently. Time does it to you. You know, we tell these stories over and over again, and sometimes, I'll speak for myself. I tell these stories over and over again, and I try my best to make them as interesting and sometimes as entertaining as possible, because the truth of many of these stories are not as nearly as exciting as some of the more exaggerated versions that you may hear of them. So some of my closest friends, and I myself, remember things differently than perhaps they actually happened. So hopefully that will answer your question, kind of, but that's the best I can do. That's all I got.
Eric, you said Sting was supposed to be like Hulk's place in the NWO?
Originally, yeah, it was going to be Sting. Because, look, I had gone down to Tampa a year earlier to try to convince Hulk that it was time for him to turn heel. You know, the red and yellow thing, he knew it wasn't working. We knew it wasn't working. It was just, it needed to change, right? It might not have been a year before. It might have been 8 months before. I flew down. I had my own plane at the time. I remember I jumped on my plane. I flew down, went to Hulk's house. Super cool. We always got along great. It was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're sitting in his office in his big house down on the beach. And, you know, I'm doing my best. And I'm a pretty good salesman when I need to be or want to be. And I had thought it through, and I knew how I was going to present it to him and all this stuff. And he's sitting there, you know, stroking his Fu Manchu like it was, you know, Aladdin's lamp. And he looked at his watch and he said, "Brother, my kids are getting out of school. I got to go pick them up. Thanks for coming down." I thought, "That's it?" He says, "Yeah, that's it. You know, until you walked a mile in my red and yellow boots, you'll never understand. See ya." I mean, it was as nice as I've ever been thrown out of a house. He was very polite as he was throwing me out of his house. You know, super cool about it. And that was it. I got my plane, flew home, and then that's when the whole NWO opportunity, when Scott became available and Kevin became available, I thought, okay, this is great. But I never would have thought of asking Hulk to be the third guy because he had already pretty much thrown me out of his house when I suggested him turning heel the first time. So yes, it was going to be Sting originally until Hulk had me in his trailer and said, "You're looking at the third man."
Scott, Kevin, what
Let me take a little survey. How many people would have rather had Sting in the NWO? I mean, to me, the only reason it worked is because we were considered New York guys. We were WWE guys, you know. And Eric was. Anytime you left WCW and went up there, Eric would show a little video of you doing a job for somebody, where the big boys play. So that was, you know, and it was all Eric's idea, you know. It was. I thought it was great. All the credit goes to Eric. I mean, and Eric was really cool about letting us give input. He made the final call, but we'd all go, "What about this? What about that? What about this?" Then he'd make the decision, and we'd go out and execute it as good as we could.
It was an amazing time. If I'm just going to throw it in, and because I get excited, you know, thinking about some of the stuff that we did back then. it was the chemistry. You know, so people say, well, why did it work so well? It worked so well for a million reasons, but one of the biggest reasons was the characters and the chemistry that the characters had. The relationship between Scott and Kevin, the real life story. Scott and Kevin were both in WCW and they didn't get the push and they never became stars in WCW and they didn't make the kind of money they thought they should have made. And that's why they went to WWE, and then they became big stars, and they were coming back over to kind of get revenge on the people that didn't treat them right the first time. That's a very believable story, the fact that it looked like WWF was trying to invade WCW.
Guys in the locker room thought it was real.
They did. But it was the chemistry, you know, we talk about the idea. The idea was just a very vague idea that evolved into what it became because of the chemistry, because of the ideas, the creativity, the personalities. Guys like Conan, you know, added a whole different vibe to it, a credible vibe. I've said this before a million times and I'll go to my grave saying it. I think Sean Waltman is just as responsible for the success of the nWo as anything, because it was the chemistry in that cast that made it so believable. The guys were having fun doing it. Well, at least these guys, not the guys they were working with. The guys were having fun doing it, and the audience can sense that. They knew it was fun, and that's why they enjoyed watching it as much as they did.
Go ahead.
I just want to say that my favorite character I did was Sable.
Hey, please send a copy of that to Brock.
No, he asked who we played, the characters we played. I was saying Sable.
WrestleMania 36, Lesnar Nash.
I'll wait for the Saudi Arabian payoff.
Way better payoff.
Okay, I have two quick questions. My first question is, Mr. Bischoff, you did a segment with Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior in a bathroom. I was just wondering, when I watched it as a kid, I kind of didn't understand. Hulk could see Ultimate Warrior. The fans could see Ultimate Warrior. The announcers could see Ultimate Warrior. The only one who couldn't see him was you, and I always kind of was curious as to why you couldn't see him.
Miller Lite. There was an abundant, copious amounts of Miller Lite backstage in most WCW shows. I put it all off on that.
When you're gonna drink heavy, you gotta drink light.
Okay, so my real question then is, in November of 1997, it looked like it was finally going to be Scott Hall's time to take over and become world champion, and you seemed to be in the prime of your life, and I really was hoping to see you win the world title. And then you win World War III, you eliminate the Giant to finally win it, and you're in line for the title opportunity. And then it kind of
At Super Brawl.
Right, at Super Brawl, that didn't end up taking place, and then it kind of just fizzled out. You did eventually get a
No,
title
Hulkster
shot.
came in, and traditionally some pay-per-views draw better than other. I don't know the details of Hulk's contract, but I'm pretty sure he's slick. So he's getting a rate and he's getting a cut of the percentage of buys, and that was traditionally a good buy rate. So he used his stroke, and I got bumped out, and he worked with Sting. That's the way it works. If I was Hulk, I'd have done the same thing. It ain't show friends, it's show business.
So I guess my question was there ever a time where you were scheduled to win the world title and finally be the man?
I never really was concerned with stuff like that. People now bring it up to me. I was always usually involved in a storyline on some level, either US champ or me and Kev with the tag belts. Always felt like I was in the mix, and I always looked at it like a team kind of concept. If I need to block so that, Sting can score a touchdown, as long as we all get Super Bowl rings, I'm cool. I've never really been a mark for myself. The only thing that's real in wrestling is the money and the miles. Everything else is showbiz. So, it's just like if you're in a Western and you're in a gunfight and you get shot and die, but you're going, no, but how about when I'm going down, I shoot the other guy? I never argued, I never politicked for the belt, or really was that concerned with it.
Thank you.
Penalty flag, gimmick infringement. It's a sweet ass shirt though, bro.
Oh my God, Rays, thank you. Scott, I love you.
I love you back.
Let me guess, you sleep in that shirt?
100%. Oh my God.
Pro Wrestling Tees offers click underwear if you're interested.
I'll get them. I'll 100% get them. I don't know if I could beat the last question from X-Pac, but I'll try my best. Scott, I will pay you to be my mother's date for my wedding. Can we make it happen?
I don't know, what's your mom look like?
What's your bank account look like?
No, I'd make public appearances. I don't do any like private stuff like that. I mean, not with dudes.
I do for 50K, I'm there.
Big Kev for 50. Scott, do I hear a counter?
Kev can have it.
My mother kind of looks like me, so you're off.
100.
Shout out to you guys, all the work you put in. Also, shout out to Sable. Speaking of Sable, Brock Lesnar, after WrestleMania 34, WWE released video of him just throwing the belt at Vince McMahon in a fury after the match. What's the craziest thing you guys had ever seen before or after a match? You don't have to use names, unless you want.
Nothing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
Well, we were involved in the Montreal screw job. I mean, I don't know. One thing about WCW I'll say is that there wasn't a hell of a lot of marks there. There were a few, but I mean, most of the guys just, as Eric said, there was always beer on ice. If there's beer on ice around like real grown men, that's usually, it's when you micromanage and have events and it says in like bold letters, no alcohol will be served, like all of WrestleMania weekend. Those are usually the ones where you have problems with people. But if you get us juiced up a little bit and we are having a good time and laughing, we really don't care.
I think maybe the environment, WCW, you knew what you were going to get paid, you had a contract, it wasn't a discretionary, type of situation where I could go, Kevin had a really good match, or I really liked hanging out with Kevin last night, I'm gonna give him a little bonus, but Scott kind of got on my nerves, so I'm gonna underpay him a little bit. I'm just making that up. That never happened for sure. But in WWEF, you never knew what your compensation was going to be. It made everybody a lot edgier, especially when it came to things like belts and where you're positioned on the card and all that kind of stuff, because that directly affected your payday. And that didn't exist in WCW. Once you showed up for what you were going to do, you knew what you were going to get paid. It was not a discretionary type of an environment. So I think that had something to do with it too.
So like future plans in WCW were more concrete, whereas maybe
Oh, I'm not saying that. Don't get me wrong.
Okay, sure.
No, I'm talking the situations like this, it's Survivor Series. And it comes down to Shawn Michaels and Diesel versus Razor Ramon. Shawn is on the apron the entire match. So basically the last 12 minutes of this match is a singles between Scott and I. Finally, we tag Shawn in, Shawn comes in, goes for the super kick, Scott ducks, Shawn kicks me in the teeth, down I go, we get our Survivor Series checks, Scott and I get 25 grand, Shawn Michaels gets 75 grand, Shawn Michaels was in the ring for about 35 seconds. But see, they didn't realize that we all told each other how much we got paid. As soon as we got our checks, we called them up and said, hey, what the F's with this? And you wonder why there's problems with people, like Eric just said. If you know exactly what you're getting, then it doesn't, like, you're getting paid the same winning or losing. If you're the guy on the bearskin rug and you get the $50,000 bonus.
There was a time in wrestling when wrestlers didn't talk to each other about money. Right. And we rode together. I mean, I was wrestling against Kev, wrestling against Shawn every night. We rode together anyway. I don't care. We'd pull in the buildings, we just all put towels over our head. It's not me. I'm not Razor. I'm going to travel with who I want to travel with. And they, at first they bitched about it, and then they just gave up. And I don't know.
when about do you think like talks of money maybe start becoming more apparent? Maybe with like the internet, where like information is out there readily.
No, that's,
advanced?
but the internet's always, I've been hearing these things with this AEW where guys are saying that, you know, well, Vince offered me $300,000 to stay at home, but I'm not gonna accept that. I'm gonna see what my market's like on the indie scene. What? I mean, it's like these guys that aren't good workers in the business sense, trying to think that Vince is offering them money to stay put, and that AEW is just giving away money, so it's going to entice them to give him $325 to pull them over, and it's just like, it don't work like that, guys. Like people, number one, you'll see like the net worth of pro wrestlers. Like you look up the net worth. I'll look at some of the net worth of some of the guys. And there's some of them I know are flat broke. It'll say $30 million. And then there's other people that you say to yourself, okay, how could you possibly know my net worth if you don't know what my corporations are, what my LLCs are, what real estate holdings I have? Like, how would you know my net worth? It's a guesstimation on what you've made in the business. You know, I mean,
According to back up Kevin's point, somebody once asked me, you know, what it's like to be a multimillionaire. I went, I don't know. But on Wikipedia it says you're worth $12.5 million. I got news for you. Not that I don't love each and every one of you people, but if I had $12.5 million, I'd be throwing freaking coconuts at tourists on the beach in Waikiki. I would not be in Buffalo. I love Buffalo, but if I had $12.5 million in the bank, I'd be on a beach. I'd be the most miserable old bastard ever. I'd be throwing coconuts at little kids, like, you know, like a rabid monkey. You know,
Your dog be chasing seagulls.
yeah, it kills me. It's just some of the things I read, I'm just like, what's the Gallows and Anderson? They said they were offered $750,000 to stay with WWE, but they're not going to take it. I'm thinking, $750,000 is what Rock and Undertaker was their bottom line guarantee like 6 years ago. You know, like, I don't think the business has changed. I don't think there's that much extra revenue laying around where you can pick guys on the bottom of it.
New Japan Pro Wrestling ain't gonna come near that.
No.
But you guys can do your YouTube show.
The whole thing, the whole thing's, the businesses will work in every aspect. Except money and miles.
2 questions. What was your favorite moment WWE/WCW? That's the first one.
Was that for me?
All 3 of you.
Oh.
I have so many good moments in the WWE. I guess the one that everybody remembers was WrestleMania 10 with Shawn Michaels, and we had the first ladder match on a pay-per-view, and it went really well, and it paid for my first house, and, you know, thank you, Vince. And WCW, I think my first night was traveling from Atlanta International to where were we making? Eric picked me up in his Jaguar. He's up here crying, poor man. He picked me up in a Jaguar. And we drove to TV, and we had never met. It had all been handled through agents and stuff. And he was kind of laying out the idea to me, and, you know, that I came through the crowd, and that was kind of the birth of the NWO. Those are 2 big moments for me.
I think for me in WWE, the scene where I was the preacher in the Chuck and Billy wedding. That was, I mean, WWE, when they decide they're going to do something and they want to do it right, they really do it right. They spent a lot of time and money on that. I had to fly out to LA and get fitted for this mask at this place that does all the big special effects for movies. And they flew the makeup artists into Minneapolis where we did that scene. And I had to show up at the building like at 9 o'clock in the morning. Normally I didn't get there till 11 or 12, but I had to get, because it took about 5.5 or 6 hours to get all that makeup on. And once it was on, makeup was on, I literally, I mean, I could look in the mirror and I couldn't tell it was makeup, right? Couldn't tell it was a rubber mask. and I was walking around the arena trying to get the character down a little bit. It was a little bit of a Jim Barnett, kind of, my boy, and I kind of faked my hand was shaking. My dad was paralyzed in his right hand. He used to walk like that sometimes. So I took a little bit of, growing up watching my dad and a little bit of Jim Barnett and was playing with this character. And I remember walking up to Brad Ringens. Most of you don't know who Brad is, but Brad was a good friend of mine in Minneapolis. Made the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, Greco-Roman, really tough son of a bitch. And he was standing there, and he had his stepdaughters were with him, and he was backstage early. And I walked up to Brad, and his stepdaughters were like 10 and 13 or something like that. And I walked up to him in his character, in his full mask, and, little girl, you smell good. Would you like to go to my dressing room? I have candy. And I'm thinking, Brad's gonna just go batshit, but he's not gonna know what to do because I'm like this old guy. He can't beat up an old guy for perving out on his stepdaughter. So, anyway, to pull that off and to shock everybody and to see the look on Brad's face backstage after the show, that had to be the most fun thing I ever did at WWE. WCW, I think, actually, personal level, getting choke slammed by the Giant was kind of an adrenaline rush. And he handled me like a loaf of bread. I mean, that's how strong he was. And I never felt a thing really, but just to go that high up in the air and not know when you're going to hit because I'm not a wrestler. I had never done anything like that before. And if you've never done something like that,
I remember throwing you off a stage in Baltimore.
Oh no, that was another. Oh my God. And you know what was funny about that is, because I don't like to rehearse stuff, I'm superstitious about rehearsing. I was afraid if we rehearsed it, I might get hurt during the rehearsal and not be able to do it live. So, never took a bump like that before. I mean, that was really the first big bump I ever took. And it wasn't until after it was over, and Kevin said, man, that was kind of weird because once I got you up, my balls were right in my face. I said, I didn't know where I was throwing you. I had a general idea. He's throwing me off the stage and going, I hope he lands where he's supposed to.
Yeah, but I could see where the end of the stage was. I'm thinking like, I could see down, but I couldn't see out, so just like, thanks for making
Contract's
me
already
rich.
signed anyway. Thanks, Eric.
At that point, it didn't matter.
And then on top of all that, like I couldn't talk. I remember coming back to the hotel, knocking on your door. You answered. I said, "You okay?" You went, "Yeah." We hugged.
Yeah.
And everything. Like, yeah, I'm okay. It was just, I didn't get a chance to. We didn't get to see each other until, after that was was over with. I was just sitting there like. But that was because it was your idea. You said, yeah, you're going to throw me off the stage. I said, yeah? Okay.
And that was at a point where announcers, historically in the wrestling business, you didn't touch the announcers. They were kind of off limits. It was wrestlers on wrestling.
Or the general manager, or the boss, or the guy that signed your checks.
And Eric, you had another harrowing chokeslam here in Buffalo years back on Raw with Kane. You were telling me about that before the show a little.
Yeah, and it's, again, same thing. I didn't want to rehearse it, and Vince didn't make me rehearse it, much to my surprise. But I was afraid to rehearse things like that because I just didn't want to get hurt in a rehearsal. And same thing, Kane's a big guy, he picked me up. Now I'm up on the stage. Now he's got me completely up in the air. And you don't realize how far something is, how far of a drop something is until you actually do it. I didn't. And I'm coming down, and it seemed like it took 45 minutes. The floor's got to be there somewhere. And of course, I made the, rookie mistake, in not being a trained wrestler. I started reaching back, trying to find the floor on my way down, and when I found it, I ended up breaking my hand. That was the only time I ever got hurt, and that was just because that was user error on my part. I should have never done that, but yeah, it was a rush. When you can't see, when you don't know where something is, and you don't know how long it's going to take to hit, it's kind of exciting.
You've ever talked to Foley about that when Taker throws him off the cage?
Oh yeah.
And he said that they walked up there during the daytime, and there was no adrenaline, there were no people. you know, so I mean, like anything else. And he said that when Taker grabbed him and they started that motion of him getting tossed over the side of the cage, there was that split, like whoa, wait a minute. I remember for a long time, Sting was dropping out of the rafters. So we decided we were in Auburn Hills, and
That triple battle royal.
yeah, triple battle royal, and they were gonna drop, instead of Sting, they were gonna drop me, and I'd come down and tell the person to get out, and you went over,
Yeah,
right?
I think it came down to me and Big Show, me and Show.
Yeah, so you've got to go up there like 1 o'clock, you know, in the rafters, and it's, besides Boston, it was the second highest of the buildings we had done. And so I'm up there, and they give you a little bucket to urinate in. And I got a picture of my wife and my son that I looked at for like 6 hours. And then it was one thing to look down and see the ring, you know, like about that big, but it was another thing once the people started to come to the building. Because then the people are so, then you're like, and the thing was, like, you know, he just said, like, you know, and Ellis was our stunt guy, he was great. He still works for WWE. And Ellis just said, like, when I tell you just step back, and you step back, I'm not kidding you, man, it's like 390 feet, it's like that. I mean, you're just like, but then it's just like the last 1.5 feet, it just kind of like, you stop and your feet touch. But I'm thinking to myself, like, whew. I was making good money too. I was like, why would I do that? I don't know why I did that.
Okay, the other question I had, any Owen Hart stories you could tell us? Any rids?
Oh, bad follow-up.
I mean, if Owen was here, this room would be dark, because he would have found a fuse box and turned the lights off by now. Owen was king of kind of innocent ribs. Like, Mr. Fuji has a history of being a little more vicious, you know.
How about the Ahmed Johnson rib? When Ahmed Johnson had his tryout, and so Owen had found a headset, and so this big giant black guy, Ahmed Johnson's, he's getting a tryout, and we're somewhere in Texas, and Owen finds a headset and he plugs it in so he can actually talk to the truck. So match starts, Owen gets on the headset and goes, hit Ahmed Johnson's music. So they hit Ahmed Johnson's music, and they just stopped in the middle of the ring, and he goes, turn that damn music off. Turn the music off, and he did it like 5 times. And finally, it got to the point where this poor guy who was trying to get a tryout was like, in his mind, he's thinking that Vince is doing this to just screw him. And he comes back and he's just irate, and I think that maybe 3 or 4 people were in on it that Owen knew. And that was the same as he did that, remember in San Jose, he kept doing that where he had almost like a squawk thing, and this is a house show, and it's like, wow, wow, like through the, but not just one match, like 3 matches in a row. And he's back there doing this. I mean,
Owen could get away with ribs because, you know, he could really deadpan and look really innocent. Like I remember one time, just something simple. It was like intermission, and some fans were following, you know, hanging around the locker room door trying to get autographs from guys. And Tony Gurria was like the road agent. He's there going, no, you have to get back. But Owen's right behind him going, come here. And you know, the people turn around and Owen's going, I don't know, Tony, they're not listening to you. And he turned back around. He just little things like that. Owen he's one of those guys too who made the road fun. You know, he always made it fun.
They did one time, it was Owen and X-Pac were traveling together. And there was remember that male rat guy that used to drive Owen around?
With the, oh yeah.
Yeah, there was like this.
The guy with the ball on the limo?
Yeah. No, not Ray, it was some other guy. But anyway, so they set up this deal for this couple was going to get married, and they were going to, they got in this honeymoon suite at this hotel, and Owen had set it up with the front desk was in on it. Everybody was in on it except this young couple. So Owen's got it would have been probably the equivalent of probably 2 ounces of baby powder in this bag, and he's telling these people that it's Coke, and so he leaves it in the room with this couple, and he calls me and says, "Hey man," he says, "I left my Coke in your room." I said, "I'm gonna come get it." In the meantime, and you'll remember because I got looted with this, Owen gets the cops involved. So when there's a knock on the door, this young guy with this girl thinks that it's Owen, and it's the cops. And it's like the same thing. Like the girl's got the Coke, and she dumps it, in the toilet. And
good girl.
Everything. Everything. Finally, because they tell me they've got to, they've got another couple that are taking the room, and they've got to get out of this room. And it comes in, it all kind of subsides, and the couple's sitting in Owen's room with kid, and Owen's like, "Where's my Coke?" And it was like the Goodfellas. "Karen, what do you mean, Karen? It's all about." And he went on and on and on. And that was Owen, and he would just. And the guy had a nervous breakdown, before the night was over, and this is his honeymoon. That's a pretty good rib.
2 more questions.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming to Buffalo. We're big fans of yours. Really a pleasure hearing your stories. My question is to you guys, when you invaded WCW with the New World Order, then all their factions within the WCW, like LWO, and then Wolfpack invaded. Is it because you guys were so popular that other things just spawned off your main NWO?
Well, Wolfpack just was a separation of the original. LWO was just because we had so many Spanish guys that were on the roster. I think it was to sell merchandise.
Yeah, it got to the point, in my opinion, that NWO was over so strong, even as villains, that we couldn't draw money because people thought they're going to mow those WCW guys down. So that's when, and this is where Hulk and Randy had some stroke. I guess Eric maybe knows the real story. You would think if you're going to split Hogan and Savage and Hall and Nash up, you'd put the 2 eras together. But Hulk was like, no. I don't want to be across the ring from those guys with live microphones. So I ended up going with the Hulkster, and Kevin Mach with the red and black, and me and Hulk with the black and white. And it was a great time. Everything we did at that time was working, so we just kept doing it.
That's what people always say, they'll say after about 27 months of that angle, man, it started getting stale. I'm thinking, I watch stuff on TV that's stale before commercial break.
And what's really cool is you look out into this audience, and this happens no matter where we go. We were in Liverpool together a couple weeks ago at a big convention, and I saw more NWO shirts over the course of 2 days in Liverpool than I've ever seen. It's something that it was so strong and it was so powerful. There's probably a dozen or more of those shirts here today, and I think it speaks to what these guys were capable of doing and the strength of that storyline.
You need to speak to Vince, because me, Kevin, Hulk still get a cut.
Every time you remind me of that, I get a tear in my eye. Not the kind that's from a good feeling either.
I just have one more question. This goes to Eric. I really was impressed how you came out with the Elimination Chamber, the original. And how do you think how the Elimination Chamber is being handled now as compared to back then?
The Elimination Chamber was something that I conceived about 7 or 8 years before I actually went to WWE. So I was so happy to be able to sit in a booking meeting with Vince and Triple H and everybody else and communicate to them the significance of the Elimination Chamber. But the truth is, it wasn't my idea. I had nothing to do with that. I played the character on TV who took credit for it. I'm not even sure whose idea it was. I think it was actually Triple H's from what I heard, but I don't know that either because they didn't let me get within 20 feet of the front door of any creative meetings, so I had nothing to do with it. I joke.
Okay.
Nothing to do with it.
I know I was in it.
Had to hurt.
That was horrible.
Question for all of you. There was a segment on Nitro where you were all doing commentary. So it's amazing you do commentary, which did more of it. And during that segment, you had WCW referee Randy Anderson come with his family, begging for his job back. I want to know all your experiences from that segment.
I mean, that was all, you know, a lot of these creative decisions, everybody would give their input and he would make the final call. So I think that was all on you. I don't remember what he did to get we lost the tag straps. We got beat at a pay-per-view the day before and lost the belts to the Steiners. Because our theory was that pay-per-views, people spend their money, you make them happy. You know, let the bad guys lose. But on TV, it's free. Screw the people, let's make them mad again. So we made them happy on the pay-per-view, then Eric fired Randy, fired Pee-wee, and then made the Steiners give us the belts back on TV.
And honestly, it's not like I spent any time thinking about what I was gonna do or say. So much of what almost all of us did was improv. Some of the best stuff I think we've done was in that moment. You knew the outline. We knew we were gonna fire Randy Anderson, but it's not like I spent a lot of time thinking about how I was gonna do it. It just happened. And again, I cannot say this enough. Chemistry is so important, and the timing is so important. With Scott and Kevin there, it was easy for me to be that smarmy, power-hungry, greasy little prick. And maybe it's natural for me. I just gotta turn the volume up just a bit. But when Randy came up with his little kids, and I saw him coming, and I thought, I've got to do something fun here. And when I leaned forward and said, tell you, because I made the audience think, oh, maybe I'm going to have a heart. Maybe he's not such an idiot after all. Trying to be careful in case there's kids here still. But when I looked down and said, oh, tell your daddy, he's still fired. You know, Now, here's the experience from that. I get back to my office in Atlanta the very next day, like Tuesday, right? Harvey Schiller calls me. He said, Eric, and Harvey Schiller never called me. You know, for all of the good and bad you may hear about it, he left me alone as much as he could. He calls me and says, Eric, we've got a problem. We need to talk. Come on up to my office. His office was up a floor above mine. So I go up to Harvey's office and said, well, this is weird. You know I didn't do anything too bad. Nothing that's out of the ordinary. So he calls me out and says, Eric, Turner Broadcasting Public Relations is being inundated with phone calls and faxes from Randy Anderson's church. The congregation in his church is livid that you actually fired Randy Anderson.
That means it worked.
You know? And Harvey didn't watch the show. He didn't know what I did. He was completely in the dark, right? I said, Harvey, it's wrestling, right? Right, Harvey? You know? And I had to convince him that I didn't really fire him, that it was all part of a storyline. And finally things settled down. But that's how much people believed that it was true, that the people in his home community that go to the same church as he did actually called my boss to get me fired. It was awesome.
Do you remember when we we ran the Steiners off the road?
Oh my gosh, I just saw that the other day too. I was reviewing a show that we were doing for 83 weeks because I completely forgot about that. That looked so real. That was awesome.
And they showed it one time and they pulled out, right?
Yeah, because we got a lot of heat for that.
That was another one.
Yeah, that was pretty
Attempted
cool
murder.
Well, gentlemen, thank you again for coming to Buffalo, coming into the
Yeah.
city
Well,
council.
Thanks all of you, really.
I was holding the camera.
See y'all later.
That was cool. That was entertaining.
That was awesome.
That was one of the best panels I sat on. I gotta do it.